The cafe sat on a crumbling street corner in Zariba, a forgotten trading post where the Sahel met the savannah. Dust devils spiraled through the afternoon heat, and the air tasted of diesel and desperation. Three men entered through the beaded curtain, their eyes adjusting to the dim interior where a solitary woman sat nursing Turkish coffee. She wore civilian clothes, faded jeans, a linen shirt rolled to the elbows, aviator sunglasses hooked on her collar. Her skin bore the particular tan of someone who'd spent years at altitude, and her hands rested flat on the scarred wooden table with a stillness that could have been mistaken for vulnerability. The men exchanged glances. Tourists were rare here, lone women rarer still. The tallest one approached first, his shadow falling across her table like a threat. He spoke in Arabic, then French, asking questions she didn't answer. His companions flanked the exits. The woman took another sip of coffee, her movements economical, precise. When the tall man reached for her shoulder, she moved. It happened faster than the ceiling fan's lazy rotation. His wrist was bent backward, his knee buckling, and then he was on the floor gasping while she remained seated, her coffee undisturbed. The second man lunged. She rose then, pivoting with balletic efficiency, using his momentum to send him crashing through a wooden chair. The third produced a knife. That was when the cafe owner, an elderly Tunisian who'd been washing glasses behind the bar, started laughing. Not nervously. A deep, genuine laugh of recognition. The woman disarmed the third man with a strike to the nerve cluster in his forearm, caught the falling blade and placed it deliberately on the bar. The men scrambled out, trailing curses and humiliation. The owner poured her another coffee. "Valkyrie," he said quietly, using the call sign that had once echoed through carrier decks and strike command channels across 3 theaters of operation. "I thought you were retired." Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Vance, call sign Valkyrie, smiled without warmth. "I am." She'd come to Zariba following a ghost. 3 weeks earlier, a signals intelligence analyst at Fort Meade had flagged an anomaly. Encrypted burst transmissions originating from this region, using a cipher architecture that matched a prototype stolen from a black site in Cyprus 8 months ago. The theft had been surgical, professional, and until now, untraceable. Vance had been activated not through official channels, but through a call from Admiral Reyes himself, the kind of conversation that never appeared on any log. "We need someone who doesn't exist on paper right now," he'd said. "Someone who can operate without a footprint." So she'd taken terminal leave, purchased a forged passport, and disappeared into the bureaucratic shadows that swallowed deniable operations. The coffee was bitter and sweet simultaneously, like memory itself. Valkyrie had earned her call sign not through bravado, but through a mission over the Strait of Hormuz 7 years prior, when her FA-18E Super Hornet had been the only aircraft available to intercept a hijacked tanker carrying liquefied natural gas toward the Qatari coast. The operation had required flying at wave-top altitude in zero visibility, threading between cargo ships while talking down a terrified civilian crew via emergency frequencies. She'd painted the tanker with her targeting laser for 43 minutes straight, her jet's fuel gauge sliding toward critical, until a SEAL team could fast-rope from helicopters onto the deck. The hijackers had been neutralized. 300,000 cubic meters of explosive cargo had been secured. Her aircraft had flamed out on final approach to the carrier, forcing an ejection 200 feet above the water. She'd been recovered within 6 minutes, bruised but whole. The Admiral had pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross to her dress whites himself. That had been the apex. What followed was the slow, bureaucratic erosion that consumed competent women who made mediocre men uncomfortable. Passed over for promotion twice. Assigned to training squadrons while her male contemporaries took combat postings. The whispered suggestions that she'd been lucky rather than skilled, that her gender had accelerated her rise rather than hindered it. She'd endured it with the same discipline she'd applied to everything else, until the day she'd walked into Admiral Reyes's office and requested retirement. He'd refused immediately. "The Navy needs pilots like you," he'd said. "Then the Navy should stop punishing them for existing," she'd replied. The compromise had been this: Terminal leave with the possibility of recall for specialized operations. Translation: deniable missions where official assets couldn't tread. The signal's intelligence from Zariba had arrived 3 days after that conversation. Now she sat in a cafe that smelled of cardamom and old violence, waiting for a contact who was 17 minutes late. The Tunisian owner, his name was Bashir, according to the faded permit behind the bar, brought her a plate of dates and almonds. "You are looking for Camel," he said. Not a question. Vance's expression didn't change, but Bashir caught the microscopic shift in her posture. "Camel does not come to places he is expected," Bashir continued, returning to his glasses. "He will find you when he believes it is safe. And if I don't want to wait, then you will never find what you seek." Vance considered this, then nodded fractionally. Outside, the sun hammered the street into submission. A military convoy rolled past, government troops in mismatched uniforms, their technical trucks mounted with Soviet-era machine guns. This was border country, where three nations' jurisdictions blurred into a lawless corridor exploited by smugglers, militants, and intelligence operatives from a dozen countries. The stolen cipher device had last been tracked to a dead drop location 40 kilometers north, but the trail had gone cold immediately after. Whoever possessed it understood operational security. Camel was her only lead, a former signals officer for the Libyan military who'd gone freelance after Gaddafi's fall, selling his expertise to whoever paid in hard currency. According to the dossier Vance had memorized then burned, Camel had been present in Cyprus when the cipher was stolen. Circumstantial, but in this world, circumstantial was often sufficient. An hour passed, then two. Vance nursed her coffee and watched the street through the cafe's grimy window. She noted patterns: the beggar who changed positions every 45 minutes, the motorcycle courier who circled the block 3 times, the vendor whose cart never seemed to attract customers. Surveillance, but whose? At sunset, when the call to prayer echoed from a nearby minaret, a boy of perhaps 12 entered the cafe. He approached Vance's table and placed a folded paper napkin beside her cup, then departed without speaking. She waited 30 seconds before unfolding it. The message was in English, written in careful block letters. "The warehouse by the dry riverbed. 1 hour. Come alone or do not come at all." Vance committed the words to memory, then used her lighter to burn the napkin in the ashtray. Bashir watched but said nothing. She left $40 American on the table, enough for the coffee and the silence. The dry riverbed was a 20-minute walk through streets that grew progressively darker and more desolate. Vance moved through shadows, her hand resting on the polymer grip of the Glock 19 concealed at the small of her back. She'd purchased the weapon in Tunis from a contact who asked no questions, along with 3 magazines of hollow-point ammunition. Not Navy issue, not traceable, completely deniable. The warehouse was a gutted concrete shell, its roof partially collapsed, its walls tagged with fading graffiti in Arabic and French. Moonlight spilled through the gaps, creating geometric shadows. Vance entered through a side entrance, her footsteps silent on the sand-covered floor. She'd barely crossed the threshold when lights blazed from multiple angles, temporarily blinding her. When her vision cleared, she found herself facing 7 men arranged in a loose semicircle. The man at the center was slight, bespectacled, perhaps 50 years old. His hands were stained with what looked like ink or circuit board flux. "Camel," Vance said. "You are punctual," he replied in British-accented English. "I appreciate punctuality. Then let's not waste time. I'm looking for something that was stolen from Cyprus. Word is you were there." Camel's smile was thin. "Many things are stolen from Cyprus. It is practically a national industry. This particular thing encrypts satellite communications, prototype technology, very expensive, very classified. The people who want it back aren't the forgiving type. And yet they send one woman instead of a tactical team. Curious." Vance held his gaze. Maybe they thought one woman was sufficient. One of Camel's men laughed, a short barking sound. Camel silenced him with a glance. "I do not have this device," he said, "but I know who does. Information, however, is valuable." "What are you offering in exchange?" "Your continued existence," Vance replied. The warehouse went very quiet. Camel studied her with renewed interest, reassessing. You are not CIA, he said finally. They send negotiators first, killers second. You are military but not official, too clean for special operations, too professional for contractors, which means you are something else entirely. Which means you should answer my question. Camel considered, then nodded slowly. The device was purchased by a man named Sarkin, Turkish national, formerly MIT intelligence, now freelance. He operates from a compound 50 kilometers northwest near the old phosphate mines, very well defended, guards, surveillance, mines on the approach roads. You've been there. I delivered technical consultation. Sarkin wanted to know if the device was genuine. I confirmed it was. He paid my fee. I departed. I have no loyalty to him beyond completed transactions. Vance processed this. What's he planning to do with it? That I do not know. Sarkin is careful with information, but I can tell you this. He is expecting buyers, plural, an auction perhaps, or a bidding war. Whatever his plan, it will happen soon. He does not keep such valuable items for long. When? 3 days, perhaps 4. He mentioned a timeline. After that, the device will be gone, sold to whoever offers the most. Vance felt the mission parameters narrowing. 3 days wasn't much, but it was enough. I need detailed intelligence. Layout of the compound, guard rotations, communication systems. Camel laughed. You intend to assault it alone. That's my concern. Yours is whether you're going to help me or obstruct me. And if I obstruct, Vance's hand moved slightly toward her concealed weapon, not a threat, just a statement of capability. Camel raised his hands in mock surrender. Peace. I am a businessman, not a martyr. I will provide what you need. But understand this, Commander, Sarkin is not a Café thug. He is a professional trained by one of the world's premier intelligence services. His compound is a fortress. Even with perfect intelligence, your odds are poor. I'll take those odds. Camel nodded slowly, respect flickering in his eyes. Very well, return here tomorrow at noon. I will have what you need. But I want payment now. 50,000 American dollars. 20, Vance countered, and only after I verify the intelligence. 35 half now, 25, 10 now, 15 after verification. Camel smiled. You haggle like someone who has spent time in these regions. I've been a lot of places. Yes, Camel said quietly. I believe you have. Vance produced a roll of $100 bills, operational funds provided by Rays through channels so convoluted they'd never survive audit, and counted out 25. She held back 15. Camel pocketed his share, then gestured to his men. They withdrew, disappearing through gaps in the warehouse walls. Within seconds, Vance was alone with the moonlight and the echoes of her own breathing. She returned to the safe house she'd established 3 days earlier, a rented room above a mechanic's shop, paid for in cash, registered to a name that didn't exist. The room was sparse. A cot, a folding table, a duffel bag containing her operational gear. She spent the next 2 hours cleaning her weapon, checking her equipment, and reviewing satellite imagery of the region on an encrypted tablet that would wipe itself if anyone else attempted access. The compound matched Camel's description. Thick walls, guard towers at 3 corners, a single reinforced entrance. Challenging but not impossible. She'd flown missions over Baghdad, had painted targets in Kandahar, had coordinated with ground teams in Mogadishu. This was a different kind of operation, but the fundamental principles remained constant. Intelligence, planning, execution, extraction. At midnight, she allowed herself 4 hours of sleep, a skill learned early in her career, the ability to rest on command. She dreamed, as she often did, of the sky. Not the hostile sky of combat, but the clean, infinite blue she'd encountered during her first solo flight at Pensacola, when the world had seemed full of possibility and the weight of expectation hadn't yet settled on her shoulders. She woke at 0400, ran through her morning routine, calisthenics, weapons check, communications test, and watched the sunrise bleed across the Sahel like a wound opening. At noon, she returned to the warehouse. Camel was waiting, alone this time. He handed her a thumb drive and a folded map marked with precise notations. The compound's layout, he said. Guard schedules, shift changes, communication frequencies. Sarkin uses encrypted radios, commercial grade but sophisticated. The mines on the approach roads are older Soviet models, pressure-triggered. The pattern is marked. Vance examined the map, committing details to memory. Guard count: 16 rotating in eight-hour shifts. Most are former Turkish army, a few Tunisian mercenaries. Well-trained, well-paid. Sarkin does not hire fools. Weaknesses? Camel hesitated. There is a water delivery every third day, a truck from the nearest town. They open the gates, conduct inspection, allow entry. It happens tomorrow at 1400 hours. You're certain? I arranged the contract myself months ago. Sarkin trusts the vendor. It is the only regular breach in his security protocol. Vance studied the map, wargaming scenarios. A water delivery truck meant opportunity, a Trojan horse if she could exploit it. But it also meant exposure, risk, the possibility of collateral casualties. The driver, she said, is he complicit? The driver is a 60-year-old man named Hassan who wants only to feed his grandchildren. He knows nothing of Sarkin's business and prefers it that way. Then I'll need to intercept the truck before it reaches the compound. Camel nodded. There is a checkpoint here. He indicated a spot on the map where the road narrows. Hassan stops to verify his cargo manifest. You would have perhaps 3 minutes. It'll be enough. She handed Camel the remaining $1,500. He pocketed it without counting. Commander, he said as she turned to leave. A question, if I may. Why send someone of your caliber for what amounts to equipment recovery? This mission seems beneath your qualifications. Vance paused in the doorway, her silhouette framed against the harsh noon light. Maybe that's exactly why they sent me, she said. Nobody expects a pilot to operate on the ground. Nobody looks for the signature. I'm a ghost who used to fly. And when this is over, when you recover the device, then I disappear again. Camel studied her for a long moment. I think you disappeared a long time ago, he said quietly. You are simply making it official. Vance didn't respond. She walked out into the heat and didn't look back. The next 18 hours were preparation. She purchased additional supplies, rope, bolt cutters, a commercial GPS jammer, civilian clothing that matched the local style. She scouted the intercept point Camel had identified, timing her approach, identifying fallback positions. At 2300 hours, she sent an encrypted burst transmission to a satellite relay. Valkyrie 2 OVERWATCH. Mission timeline ACCLERATED. Execute retrieval plus 36 hours. Confirm. The response came 90 seconds later. OVERWATCHCONFIRMS. Extraction ASSETS PREPOSITONED. Authenticate Sierra 7 Whiskey. She sent the authentication code, then powered down the tablet. The morning of the operation broke clear and windless. Vance positioned herself at the intercept point before dawn, concealed in a depression 30 meters from the road. She wore local clothing, her face partially covered by a scarf against the dust. Her weapons were hidden but accessible. At 1345, Hassan's water truck appeared, laboring up the slight incline toward Sarkin's compound. Vance waited until the truck stopped to check cargo, exactly as Camel had predicted. She emerged from concealment, moving with purpose but not haste. Hassan's eyes widened when she appeared beside his door. Peace, she said in Arabic, her hands visible. I mean no harm, but I need your truck. Hassan's face went pale. Please, I am only a delivery man. I have grandchildren. I know. Which is why you're going to do exactly what I say, and in 2 hours you'll be home with your grandchildren, unhurt and richer than you were this morning. She showed him a roll of American currency, $5,000, nearly a year's wages in this economy. All you have to do is delay your delivery by 1 hour. Go to the cafe in town, have tea, return when I tell you. Hassan stared at the money. The men at the compound, they will be angry if I am late. Tell them your truck had mechanical problems. Show them this. She produced a disconnected spark plug. Say it took time to diagnose and repair. They won't question it. Hassan took the money with shaking hands, then the spark plug. 1 hour. 1 hour, park your truck at the cafe. If anyone asks, you've seen no one, know nothing. He nodded rapidly, then drove away. Vance watched until the dust settled, then doubled back to where she'd hidden her tactical gear. She changed quickly, black clothing, load-bearing vest, weapons check. The Glock at her hip, a suppressed MK-18 carbine slung across her back, fragmentation and smoke grenades on her vest. Not Navy gear, not official, completely deniable. She waited for Hassan's truck to return, which it did precisely 60 minutes later. She'd spent the interval bypassing the first layer of surveillance, a camera mounted on a pole 300 meters from the compound. Vance approached the truck from Hassan's blind spot, then climbed onto the rear flatbed where the water barrels were secured. She positioned herself between two large containers, invisible from any angle except directly above. The truck rumbled forward. Through gaps in the cargo, Vance observed the compound's outer wall growing larger. The gates were steel reinforced, topped with razor wire. Guard towers flanked the entrance, each manned by 2 sentries with automatic weapons. The truck slowed, stopped. She heard voices in Turkish, the guards questioning Hassan. His response was exactly as rehearsed, apologetic, explaining the mechanical delay. A guard climbed onto the flatbed, checking cargo. Vance controlled her breathing, absolutely still, her hand resting on her knife. The guard thumped the water barrels with his palm, listening for the liquid slosh, then jumped down. "Proceed," he called. The gates opened. The truck rolled forward into the compound's interior courtyard. Vance counted to 10, then slipped from the flatbed as the truck made a wide turn. She rolled behind a stack of supply crates, her movements fluid, practiced. From her position, she could observe the compound's layout. The main building was 2 stories, reinforced concrete, narrow windows. Guards patrolled in pairs, communicating via radio headsets. A generator hummed somewhere, providing power. Security cameras covered the main approaches. She spotted the communications array on the roof, satellite dish, antenna arrays. That would be where Sarkin kept his most sensitive equipment, which meant the cipher device was likely in the main building's upper floor. Vance waited for the guard patrol to pass, then moved to the compound's eastern wall. She'd identified a blind spot in the camera coverage during her planning phase, a 3-meter gap caused by an architectural oversight. She used it now, ascending the wall using a climbing rope and ascenders. The wall's top was lined with broken glass set in concrete. She laid a rubber mat over it, pulled herself up, then retracted the rope. From the wall's top, she had a clear view of the compound's interior and the approach roads beyond. She descended into the compound's eastern quadrant, an area that housed storage buildings and a vehicle maintenance shed. Fewer guards here, less traffic. She moved between structures, her footfalls silent on the packed earth. A guard appeared suddenly around a corner. Vance didn't hesitate. She closed the distance in 3 strides, her hand clamping over his mouth while her other arm applied a blood choke. He struggled for 5 seconds, then went limp. She dragged him behind a pile of fuel drums, secured him with zip ties, gagged him. Non-lethal when possible. That had always been her preference. But she carried lethal options, and she would use them if necessary. The main building's side entrance was secured with an electronic lock. Vance had anticipated this. The thumb drive Camel provided included access codes. She entered the 6-digit sequence, heard the lock click open. The interior was cooler, air-conditioned. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. She moved through a corridor lined with offices, each one empty at this hour. Most of Sarkin's personnel would be on perimeter duty or monitoring the communications center. She reached the stairwell, ascended to the 2nd floor. The corridor here was narrower, more secure. She counted 3 cameras, but her approach angle kept her in their blind spots. At the corridor's end was a reinforced door marked in Turkish, "No admittance without authorization." This was it. The cipher device would be inside. Vance examined the door. Electronic lock, more sophisticated than the side entrance. No keypad, only a card reader. She'd prepared for this too. An electronic bypass device the size of a credit card, capable of emulating security credentials through electromagnetic pulse. She placed it against the reader, activated it. The lock cycled through algorithms for 11 seconds, then clicked open. She entered a room that resembled a small laboratory. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with electronic equipment, oscilloscopes, signal analyzers, encryption testing gear. And there, in the center of the room on a steel table, the stolen cipher device. It was smaller than she'd expected, roughly the size of a briefcase, matte black with military-grade connectors and a touchscreen interface. Vance approached the table, her weapon sweeping corners, clearing threats. The room was empty. She holstered her pistol and examined the device. It appeared intact, undamaged. She couldn't verify functionality without powering it up, which would risk triggering alerts. That was a problem for later. Right now, the priority was securing and extracting. She placed the device in a reinforced bag designed to block all electromagnetic emissions, then slung it across her back. That was when the alarm started. Not a blaring siren, but a low, insistent tone that pulsed through the compound's communication system. Vance's jaw tightened. The device had been wired with a proximity alarm, something Camel's intelligence hadn't detected, or possibly Sarkin had added the security measure recently. Either way, the situation had just escalated from covert infiltration to combat exfiltration. She moved quickly, returning to the corridor. Voices echoed from the stairwell, guards responding to the alarm, converging on the second floor. Vance couldn't go back the way she'd entered. She needed an alternate route. The corridor had 3 doors besides the one she'd just exited. She tried the nearest, locked. The second opened into what appeared to be Sarkin's personal office. She scanned it quickly. Desk, filing cabinets, a window overlooking the compound's western wall. The window was reinforced but not bulletproof. Vance grabbed a desk chair, hurled it through the glass. The window shattered. She kicked out the remaining shards, then leaned out. The drop was approximately 5 meters to a flat roof below, part of an adjacent single-story structure. Survivable. She heard boots in the corridor, voices shouting in Turkish. No time for finesse. Vance climbed through the window frame and dropped. She hit the lower roof hard, rolling to absorb impact. Pain flared in her left ankle, but she forced herself up, testing it. Sprained, not broken. She could work with that. Automatic weapons fire erupted from above, guards shooting from the window she just exited. Rounds sparked off the roof around her. Vance sprinted for the roof's edge, favoring her good ankle, zigzagging to spoil their aim. She reached the edge and dropped again, this time into the compound's vehicle yard. A technical truck was parked nearby, its mounted machine gun unmanned. She landed beside it, using it for cover as more guards appeared. They were coordinating now, attempting to flank her position. She had perhaps 90 seconds before they'd have her surrounded. Vance made a tactical decision. She climbed into the technical's driver's seat, keys dangling from the ignition, operational security laziness that she silently thanked. She started the engine, threw it into gear, and accelerated toward the compound's main gate. Guards scattered as the truck bore down on them. She kept her head low, one hand on the wheel, the other drawing her pistol. The gate was closed, secured. No time to stop. Vance floored the accelerator. The technical hit the gate at 40 kilometers per hour. Metal screamed. The gate's locking mechanism shattered, and then she was through, the truck fishtailing on the road beyond the compound. Muzzle flashes erupted behind her, guards firing, but at range now, accuracy degraded. Rounds punched through the truck's tailgate but missed her. She drove hard, navigating by memory and the GPS coordinates she'd memorized. The extraction point was 18 kilometers northeast, a dry lakebed where a helicopter would be waiting. She radioed ahead using the encrypted frequency. Valkyrie to Overwatch, I'm compromised, package secured, heading to extraction, ETA 22 minutes, expect hot pursuit. The response came immediately. Overwatch copies Valkyrie. Bird is inbound, ETA 20 minutes. Be advised we're tracking multiple vehicles departing your location. Sarkin's response team. Professional, well-equipped, highly motivated. They'd pursue her to the extraction point and attempt to recover the device by force. This was about to become a running gun battle. Vance pushed the technical to its limits, the engine screaming in protest. The road was rough, unpaved, lined with rocks and occasional vegetation. She navigated by instinct and peripheral vision, watching her mirrors for pursuit. They appeared 3 minutes later, 2 vehicles, possibly more beyond visual range. Black SUVs, military-grade, faster than her stolen technical. The first SUV closed to within 200 meters. A figure leaned from the passenger window, automatic weapon firing. Rounds stitched the ground beside Vance's truck, walking closer. She jerked the wheel, zigzagging again, but the technical suspension wasn't designed for evasive maneuvers. The second SUV pulled alongside, attempting a parallel intercept. Vance could see the driver clearly now, a man with a shaved head and tactical vest. He was trying to force her off the road. She let him close the gap, then slammed her brakes. The SUV shot past, its driver overcorrecting. Vance accelerated again, gained 50 meters, but it wouldn't last. The pursuers were better vehicles, better drivers. She needed an equalizer, the mounted machine gun. Vance steered with her knees, reached back to grab the weapon. Soviet-era DSHK .50 caliber belt-fed. She pulled the charging handle, chambered around. Steering one-handed, she swung the gun toward the pursuing SUVs and fired a long burst. The recoil was brutal, the muzzle climb nearly uncontrollable. But some rounds found their target. The lead SUV's windshield spiderwebbed, the vehicle swerving violently before careening off the road into a ditch. One down. The second SUV dropped back, its driver now wary. But two more vehicles appeared on the horizon, reinforcements, probably radioed ahead to intercept. Vance was running out of time and road. The extraction point was 11 kilometers ahead. She could see the dry lakebed now, a white expanse shimmering in the afternoon heat, and above it a black dot growing larger, the helicopter. A 60 Black Hawk coming in fast and low, dust trailing behind it like a contrail. Vance radioed, "Valkyrie to Overwatch, I've got multiple hostiles in pursuit, request immediate suppression." Overwatch copies, hold your course. The Black Hawk swept over Vance's position, its door gunners opening fire with M134 miniguns. The Gatling-style weapons roared, 6,000 rounds per minute chewing into the road behind her. The pursuing SUVs scattered, one taking hits that shredded its engine block. The helicopter made a hard turn, positioning itself between Vance and her pursuers. Vance reached the lakebed's edge and drove onto its smooth surface, the technical bouncing violently over the transition. The Black Hawk was already descending, touching down 50 meters ahead. Its rotors kicked up a blinding dust storm. She abandoned the truck while it was still moving, grabbing the device bag and running through the rotor wash. A crew chief at the helicopter's door reached out, hauling her aboard. "Go," she shouted over the turbine scream. The pilot needed no encouragement. The Black Hawk lifted off even as Vance tumbled into the cargo bay. Through the open door, she could see the remaining SUVs reaching the lakebed, figures spilling out, weapons raised. But the helicopter was already climbing, banking hard, gaining altitude and speed. Within seconds, the pursuers were distant specks. Vance lay on the cargo bay floor, breathing hard, her injured ankle throbbing. The crew chief handed her a headset. "Ma'am, you okay?" She nodded, then keyed the mic. "Package secured. Minimal casualties. Mission complete." Through her headset, she heard Admiral Reyes' voice, transmitted via satellite link. "Outstanding work, Valkyrie. You've just prevented a major intelligence compromise." Vance closed her eyes, felt the helicopter's vibration through her body. The sky outside the door was clear and blue, infinite in all directions. "Just doing my job, sir. That's why we activated you. Get some rest. We'll debrief in 12 hours." The channel closed. The crew chief offered her water, which she accepted. The Black Hawk flew northeast, toward a staging base in Algeria where she'd undergo medical evaluation, tactical debrief, and eventually disappear back into the civilian world. The device bag sat beside her, anonymous and unassuming, containing technology that could compromise satellite communications across 3 continents. She'd retrieved it alone, using skills that had nothing to do with flying jets but everything to do with who she was: adaptable, resourceful, unbreakable. Later, after the mission reports were filed and classified, after the device was secured in a vault at Fort Meade, Admiral Reyes would ask her if she wanted to remain active for future operations. She would decline, not because she couldn't do the work, but because she'd proven to herself what she'd always known: her value wasn't contingent on anyone else's recognition. She didn't need the Navy's validation. She didn't need the call sign or the rank or the medals. Valkyrie was simply who she was, with or without the uniform. But that conversation was still days away. For now, she sat in the helicopter's cargo bay, watching the African landscape scroll beneath her. The crew chief, a young sergeant with a Wisconsin accent, leaned closer. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking what you do before this. I mean, you move like special operations, but you're wearing a pilot's watch." Vance glanced at the bradling on her wrist, its chronograph functions calibrated for aviation. "I flew," she said simply. "Jets. FA-18s, carrier-based strike aircraft." The sergeant's eyes widened. "No shit, sorry ma'am, I mean that's incredible. We don't usually see pilots doing ground ops." "Maybe you should see it more often," Vance replied. The Black Hawk crossed into Algerian airspace 90 minutes later, descending toward a remote airstrip where two C-130 transports waited. The transfer was efficient, wordless. Vance was escorted to a private cabin aboard one of the C-130s, where a Navy corpsman examined her ankle. "Sprain, grade 2, he announced. "You'll need to stay off it for a week, ice and elevation." "I'm surprised you were running on this." "Didn't have a choice." "No, ma'am, I suppose you didn't." He wrapped her ankle in compression bandages, handed her anti-inflammatory medication, then departed. Vance was alone for the first time in 18 hours. The C-130's engines droned, a familiar sound. She'd flown in similar aircraft dozens of times, riding in the cargo bay during joint exercises or deployments. Now she was cargo herself, being transported back to the world of bureaucracy and oversight. She slept finally, deeply, without dreams. When she woke, the C-130 was descending toward an airfield she didn't recognize. The crew chief informed her they'd landed at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. From there, she'd be transferred to a military flight bound for Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington. The debriefing happened in a windowless conference room at the Pentagon 36 hours after the extraction. Admiral Reyes presided, along with representatives from the Defense Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and the Office of Naval Intelligence. Vance sat at the head of the table, her ankle propped on a chair, and recounted the mission in precise detail. Her interrogators were thorough, asking for clarification on timing, tactics, intelligence sources. She answered every question factually, without embellishment. When asked about the three men in the cafe, the incident that had started everything, she described it clinically. "3 local hostiles attempted an assault. I neutralized them using hand-to-hand combat techniques. No weapons deployed. No fatalities. The incident did not compromise my cover." One of the DIA representatives, a colonel whose name she hadn't caught, leaned forward. "Commander, your personnel file indicates you have minimal ground combat training. How did you acquire the skills demonstrated during this operation?" Vance met his eyes. "Sir, I've been a naval officer for 15 years. During that time, I've completed survival schools, combat training, and operational security courses that would fill 3 binders. I've served in combat zones on 4 continents. The idea that pilots are somehow incapable of ground operations is a misconception." The colonel leaned back, chastened. Admiral Reyes suppressed a smile. "The Deb,